Hey everyone, how are you doing? I hope you can all hear me. Um, my name is Jonathan, and I will be going through Lens Studio today. So I really appreciate you all coming out here. I hope you had a great new year. Welcome to 2021. At the end of last year, you may have seen uh, Lens Fest. So we have this banner here in Lens Studio, and we released Lens Studio 3.3 with a lot of new features. So I want to dive deep into some of the new features we have in this new release. And then one of my favorite thing about this is visual scripting, where you'll be able to script without typing any code at all, um, or even add your own custom code within visual scripting so that you can combine both node graph scripting with regular code writing. So we'll get through some of that today. Um, but yeah, for all those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. This is our monthly live stream. We have this at the last Wednesday of every month, where we'll talk about different things, different tips and technique. And yeah, we'll just have some fun. On the side over here, I have my computer that's streaming all the comments that you have. So feel free at any time to ask me any questions, and I can try to tackle it. And also, if you want to learn something, let me know so we can figure out how we can teach you that. But yeah, let's just have fun. Let's keep this casual and just tell me what you want to hear. But yeah, I'm just reading over here on the side. So if I look to the sides because I'm reading your comments, really want to do the stream together. So let's get started. I won't go too much to the details of Lens Studio 3.3 because I know you're all here to learn more about visual scripting and Lens Studio, but I just want to show real quick some of the awesome features. One, we released My Lenses 2.0, an easier way to publish lenses through Lens Studio. One of my favorite feature here is now when you publish your lens, you can say it should be private. That is, no one should be able to find it within Snapchat unless you send them a link or a snap code without you having to wait for the lens to go live. So I think that's a really neat feature that they've added. This is visual scripting. We'll go a bit deeper into this in a second, so I'll skip over here. We have texture compression. We know how hard it is for you to pack all these content within a lens because there's a limit for megabytes. You know, people all over the world have different types of phone, different types of connection. You want it to be fast, so the faster your lens get there, the faster the lens user will be happy because they can experience it quickly. We made improvements to the logger, so it's a bit easier to understand the code that you're writing and the issues that you have, so you can fix them even faster. We have building blocks. So this is really cool. If you're getting started with Lens Studio and want to learn more, you can jump to our additional resources page here on the Lens Studio forum, where you can get a lot of different things like, hey, I want to learn how to make a scavenger hunt with a lens, which is super awesome, taking the lens outside of Snapchat. You can learn that here. There's even a download for the template. And if you're new and you're not sure where to start, there's this page where it tells you, hey, I'm a designer who does 2D images. How can I get started with Lens Studio? Or, hey, I'm a machine learning developer. How can I get started with Lens Studio? So definitely a super awesome resource. And there's a lot more. Refinement pack, you can get little code snippets. So for example, spawning things in 3D or moving objects along a path or creating trails within your lens. As easy as download it and drag it into your project and you'll have it. So definitely recommend checking out this page, additional resources. So if you go to our support site, support.lensstudio.snapchat.com, go ahead and click additional resources and you'll find all the amazing content here. And I'll pause there for a second before we get into the templates. So we see that some of you have already started using visual scripting, so that's super awesome. Really glad to hear that you're getting into it. That's a really great comment on to be able to see what the visual scripting code output is to learn more. What's actually really interesting is that visual scripting is pretty close to regular scripting, so you're basically typing what you would type into the code as well. We'll definitely give the feedback to the team in case they find it very that this is something that you all want. And again, also put in the live chat if there's anything like, wow, I've been using Lens Studio for 1 day, for 1 month, for 1 year, for more, and I have this feedback. That's something that we love to hear, because that's how we're going to improve our products together, because we're in this journey together. So that's super awesome. Just really quick on the other templates, we have the face morph template, which allows you to drag in your own 3D mesh and be able to track it to face mesh. So this is really cool if you're a 3D designer, because all you need to do is match the UV to our face mesh, which we have provided the UV. You match it, and then immediately you'll be able, when you move your eyebrow, you'll move that character's eyebrow. Actually, instead of going through this image here, I'll show you within Lens Studio in a second. But yeah, definitely check out the news page and take a look at all the cool stuff that's happening in the community, what's happening within Lens Studio. So yeah, let me jump into the tool really quick. Let's see here. Yes, back to Lens Studio. And before I get started, gonna check the chat really quick. So we have a question. So you want to be able to move an image into the space. So we'll try to tackle that at the end. And if not, we'll try to hit it either in the forum or in the next live stream. So thank you for that thoughtful comment. You can make a script graph where you tap, you cycle through sets of objects like sounds, images, and material parameters. Awesome. So that's actually something that we'll take a look at. And also, we'll try to go back through some of the features that you've already known. So behavior script and tween script, and you can see how they kind of interplay together. And then there's a few things to modify on my own within the visual script. Awesome. Glad to hear you've been playing with Lens Studio since October. And I love that you're a game design student interested in AR. A lot of my friends, our coworkers, are also gamers who became a game designer, who then became an AR developer. So you're here with a great set of friends. And then the particles just don't work on the trail, but objects do show. So I'm not quite sure what that means. And if it's okay, go to the forum and write that comment, and we check the forum all the time, and I'll try to help you there if I don't get to it by the end of the stream. Oh, Amir. Amir is here to hang out with us. Thank you, Amir. It sounds like he will be able to help you out as well. So really glad to see that we're talking to each other. So drop your comments in the chat, and Amir will be able to help you out, or I'll try to tackle it at the end of this stream. So with that, let's get started. The first thing I want to do when we're talking about visual scripting, I'll start by opening a template. And the reason why I want to do that is because this is an amazing resource that has so many different examples of what you can do within visual scripting. And so if you feel like you missed something as we go through the stream, or you want to learn a bit more, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is actually going to be in this template. And so you can see on the left side in the objects panel, where you can see a list of the things within the lens. There are a lot of different examples, and next to them you'll see that there are checkboxes. So they're all off right now at the bottom here, but we have this one, tap to trigger animation example. So you can see if I tap on this, it will animate the rubber ducky here. And what we can do is, to learn how this is done, I can press the down arrow here to open, what are the things in this example. And I can click on the scripts that says edit me. And what you'll see is that there is a script component which has some information like, the animation name. So it makes sense if you're trying to get something to animate, you'll need the animation name to run on it. And it says it loop counts 1. And I can modify any of these parameters. So I can set 3, so I press it, and it bounces 3 times. So that's really cool. You're getting into visual scripting, and you can pass these scripts around, and if your friends are not as into visual scripting, or they're a designer, you're working with a designer, they can play with the component and modify these settings. But let's take a look deeper about how this tap to trigger animation actually works. So you can right click this field next to the script and click select. And what that will do is select that resource and show it in the resources panel. So let's take a look at that again. So I have this object which contains the controller, the thing that's driving this animation, and it has some references. So the script has a reference to tap to trigger, so I can right click any of these references. So for example, if I wanted to know where is this ducky coming from, I can right click that ducky and click select. I'll see that, oh, the ducky is within this example, so within the tap to trigger animation example. Or I can right click the script and click select. It will show that script in the resources panel, so the list of all the things that you can use within your lens that you've added into your project. So I can double click on that now, and you'll notice in the script graph editor, there's this simple graph that shows you how this function works. And the best part is that it's annotated, so you can say, at the first part, you can say, it says swap this to customize the trigger, and it says set layer weight to 1, and then you call start animation. So before we get too deep into this one, I wanted to show you some other things first, so we can get a lay of the land. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click the triangle again, so to collapse that object example. So now we just went to the tap to trigger example, and next to it I can press the checkbox to turn it off, and I can turn on another example. So in this case, tap to set random color example. So I can now see on the preview panel here what you'll see in the lens. I can tap through them, and you'll see that the color of the fox's vest change every time I tap. So I'll pause there for a second. I know I threw a lot. We're gonna keep digging in it more and more, and you'll get more comfortable. Well, look at the side real quick to see if there's any questions. So the question is, will you save this stream on your channel? Yes, you should be able to access it after this. Awesome, and otherwise it looks like Amir is helping out, so thank you, Amir. By the way, a lot of the people here on this live chat are actually super knowledgeable. So it's all of us are learning from each other. I know there's a few OLCs in there, a few folks who are on the forum all the time. So, feel free to also chime in with your thoughts and what you've learned and any advice you can give to the creators. And I'll be happy to shout them out as it makes sense. And I want to learn from you too. So feel free to just hang out in there and help each other out. So going back to this project, what we've done so far is look at the different examples. So by checking on these checkboxes, you can see different examples that uses visual scripting. So we did this tap to set random color example. I can click on this countdown example, and you can see there's a countdown going on. And for all of these examples, what we talked about is that you can click on the triangle next to it, and you'll notice, and clicking on the triangle here in the objects panel, what you're saying is like, I want to dig a bit deeper about what are the childrens of that object or that example. And in this example, there are a script, countdown, edit me, right? You can see there's a script here in the inspector panel, and then there's content design, which just has, the color correction to make things white, so I can turn this on and off. There's the countdown text, I can turn that off to see how that works, and so forth. So all these examples here, you can dig deep to see how they work. And then specifically in this stream, what we're talking about is visual scripting. So if I select that script earlier, I can see that there's a countdown script, and I can right click on them and click select on that script, and it'll show me hey, look, the countdown script is over here in the resources panel. So the list of things that you can use within your lens. And then I'll double click on that script to open it in the script graph editor. So this shows how this logic is done. It's annotated. You can see, when we initialize, we want to set the current time. That's our reference point, right? And so we'll set that into the countdown timer, and then we have every update, we get the current time, and then we subtract between the current time and when we started. And so you can start to tease out how this lens is made by just looking at these different examples. So here's another timer example. And earlier someone asked about cycling through scene objects. So there's actually an example here, tap to cycle scene objects. So I can open this example again by clicking that arrow. I can see that there's a script, right? There's a script icon here. And then in the inspector, so the things that are on this object, I'll see that there's a script. And it says a list of scene objects. And then I can right click on the script under the script component and click select. And I can double click on it in the resources panel. So opening that resource, and you can see how this is done. So you can see that what we're going to do when we start, when we initialize the lens, we're going to iterate through the list of scene objects and then loop through them. And depending on whether it should be on and off, it will turn them on and off. So you can take a look at each of these examples and see how they work. Before I get too much further into this, some of you may be wondering, well, that's awesome. Now I know how to make how script graphs are added into Lens Studio. But what are all these different blocks? What are all these different colors that I see? What are all these different lines? And so if you use our material editor, this is the same thing there. But basically, we're defining logic by connecting these different boxes together. So what we're saying here is when initialize happen, and when you hover over initialize, there's an I button, so I can click on that information button, and it'll tell me something about that box. It's the initialization event executes once when the lens starts. And there's this triangle right there, the execution node. And what this does is it tells you we're going to start from here and we're going to follow this button down to iterator. And in the same way, you can click on the I and it will say it will iterate through the next object in the array. So what's the array? Well, there's another input here called array, and I can zoom out here and you can see that it's a list of scene objects here. So I'm not going to go too deep into the exact details of this because there's already a couple amazing videos on our YouTube channel. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click learn more on one of these. And so this will land you into our Lens Studio website. You can see all the different nodes that is available. But more importantly, if I go into the learn section and go to visual scripting, so because we're learning visual scripting, you can see that there is watch the getting started video and get the overview. So what I would do is I would click on the watch the getting started video. There's an amazing video here by none other than Amir, who is our famous lens developer here on the live chat. So feel free to ask him again any question. He's an expert on this. So you can go and watch that. It explains what the different nodes is and how to get started working on your first node. And if you go back to that page, there's a get the overview. This is a great page that shows you exactly what we're going to be doing today. And also there are types of nodes. So you can learn, that orange node that's called initialize. What is that? Well, that's the event node, and it's the root action of any graph. It's the thing that kicks off the list of logic that we're going to do. There's a lot of great resources already. And if you've tuned into LensFest or you check out our LensFest content, you'll also find a stream by Jacob and Len, who is the most amazing engineer, talking even more deeply about the node graph. So there's a lot of different resources. I definitely recommend you subscribing to our YouTube channel if you haven't, because we continually pump out these different types of learning content. And so if this stream feels like you want to get deeper or you want to learn more, subscribe to our channel. We're always coming out with new content, and also take a look at the backlog of existing content. So definitely recommend you not just watching this stream, because we can only cover so much in our time today. But there are at least 4 videos already in visual scripting, if not more. And I say 4 because it says 4 right here. But there's definitely a lot of different contents that I'd recommend you check out on our channel. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second and take a look at the chat. So there's this comment: is the documentation finished? I remember not all the nodes were given details last I checked. So that's a really great point. So one thing that I want to say about visual scripting is it's really cool because you're actually learning real JavaScript. And what I mean by that is visual scripting is actually allowing you to access Lens Studio's API. So Lens Studio specific things like get whether a person's mouth has opened. So that's very specific to Lens Studio, to AR, to Snapchat. And it allows you to access that, but it also allows you to access basic JavaScript functions. So JavaScript code that you would run anywhere else, like on the web. So things like getting a random number from 0 to 1. That has nothing to do with Lens Studio. And if you use random, you would be learning regular JavaScript. And so all of these are available within Lens Studio. And so we don't want to reinvent the wheel too much, because there are way better people out there who are explaining all the different functions of JavaScript. And so those functions, you can just quickly search on Google, random JavaScript, and choose any of the links here, and you can learn more about some of those functions. So some of the functions may not be, if they're from JavaScript, they won't have as much detail because there's already great, amazing documentation out there. But if you find some functions you're like, hey, I'm really not sure how to go about this, I couldn't find information on it whatsoever, what we want to do is hear from you. So go ahead and go to our support, support and the forum, and just ask us here. We're always checking to see how we can improve, so this will help us to know where we're missing documentation. So go ahead and check it out. And what's awesome is there's a lot of you already posting on it. Like I've seen, for example, Jonah here has made a template for doing body detection, so you can get more resources here as well. So yeah, just check out all the different content here to learn more about Lens Studio. Well, with that, let's get started making our first visual scripting. So I'll go ahead and go back to Lens Studio, and I'm going to close out here, and I'm going to go make a new project. While that loads, there's this iterator there. I'm going to make sure that I didn't miss any comments here. Awesome. So we have our first Lens Studio project here. And maybe what we'll just level set right now and create the most, the hello world of visual scripting. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to print hello world into the logger. So what we want to do whenever we're starting a lens, right, and we want to use visual scripting, the thing is visual scripting is just like any resource. So any an image or regular text scripting or an ML model, anything like that. So we're going to click add new resource, and we're going to go ahead and press script graph. So we have the script graph, and we have this initialize and update event. So this is again the beginning of all our script. This is what kicks off our script. When the lens initializes, when the lens first starts, do this, or every frame in the lens do this in update event. And so what we're going to do is in the initialize event, we can click on this square next to initialize and pull it out, and you'll get a list of things that you can call when the lens initializes. So there's a long list of things you can do, and because we want to do hello world, we want to print it, right? So we're going to go ahead and type print here, and just press enter here. And so now we have initialize, we have a print, and we can say our message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this triangle out. So here you have this sidebar by pressing on this triangle, and you can say set the properties of this node. So just like you have an inspector in the objects panel of every object you select. So if I select light, there is a light source, and the components of that light source. If I select a node, there is an inspector for the settings of that node. What I'm going to do is press this button here on the top right just to give us a little bit more room. I've minimized my preview here to this corner, make things a little bit bigger here. And now I can just write hello world because we want to say hello world. The astute viewer here will realize, wait, it doesn't say hello world at all. You didn't do it. And that's because the script is not running yet. We've just made a resource. And as we've talked about before, things need to be in the objects panel for it to be called in the lens. So what I'm going to do is create an empty object here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put script graph there. And by dragging the resource into this object, we're basically saying, hey, I want a script with this script graph, with the script graph that I just said. And now you can see there's our hello world right here. So we'll call this my first script. So you can say my first object with script. So again, I have this object. I have the script that is on this object. So my first object with script, it has the script component, and my script, again, right click select. It's showing that I have this resource, my first script, and I can double click it, and now we have the hello world. Okay, so now we can start to see what else we can do. So let's try adding an object. So we can do an object here, a sphere. So now we have a sphere here, and some of you may know that there's this thing within Lens Studio called Tween. So I can go ahead and click plus here, and I'll say Tween Manager. Give it a second. And tween is another way to say animation, right? So I can see that there are these boxes moving around, color changing, and so forth. And what I want to do is connect that as animate the sphere that we've just made here. And we'll do it with visual scripting. So I'm going to move this to the top because we want to be able to access tween before we get to the sphere, right? And I'll remove these examples because we're going to make the example right now. I can click on the sphere, and the traditional way that you would use tween in Lens Studio is by opening the tween in the resources, and you'll have a resource called, I don't know, tween transform. If you want to change the transform, I'll drag that in, and I can tell the objects to move from 0 to, let's say, 10. Awesome. So now my object is moving. And this is great, but I now can't change or dynamically where I want the object to move. And so this is where visual scripting comes in. It allows you to easily change the different things that you want to do in the code, in real time in the lens. So instead of typing on the right side here in the inspector, you can have it go through and call the setup where to start and end you want it to be. And so what we're going to do next is try and apply that. So I'm going to go ahead and in the Tween resources, if you open Visual Scripting Custom Node, there's this script called All Tween Nodes, and I can double click on that, and you can see that there's all these different nodes and options. And so, earlier we were changing the position or the transform, and you can see that there's a position section, and there's a section called Tween pause to, tween position from to, or tween position from. And because I want to change where the object is moving to, I'm going to click on the tween position to, and I can go ahead and copy it. So I'm going to right click and copy. So now I have this node. I'm going to go back to my script, right? So my first script, where are you? So my first script, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that node. So now I have this tween position from to. And what we need to tell is, like, what's the target object? What are we going to tween? And we're going to tween that sphere, right? So like before, we're going to click on that target object because we want the target object, pull it out, and then you'll get the selector for what node you want. And in this case, I want a scene object, and I want it to be an input. So here's an input to a scene object, and we'll call it something like target object. Now, if I see my first object with script, you'll notice the script has some options for target object. And now here I can select sphere because I want to move the sphere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the script that is moving the sphere right now, so you can see when I refresh the lens, the sphere doesn't move. And you can see now I have my first script, and it has a target object of sphere. So now this script has a reference to the sphere, so this target object, and what we want to do is move it, right? So like before, we can set the position where we want it to go to, so we'll go 0 to 10, and then I'm going to go ahead and tell it when to play, when should it execute. I'll connect this to the initialize node because we want it to move when the lens burst initialize. So here I'm going to change how long it'll take to play the tween, so I'm going to say 10, and now you can see the object slowly moving, or I can move it to 1, and the object moves. So in other words, what we're doing is when the lens starts, call this function tween position from to on this object called scene object. And then you can do other things. Let's say, hey, there's this easing function, and I want to change it instead of moving slowly, linearly like that. Let's make it bounce. And what I'm going to do is, again, open that all tween nodes in the resource panel where you can see all the nodes that we have. And you'll notice there's an easing section. And we can do, let's say, the elastic function. I want it to be bouncy. So I can right-click copy, go back to my first script, and go right-click paste. Elastic function. And so now we can say, hey, I want it to be elastic whenever it's going in and when it's going out. And now we just need to tell the lens, hey, look, use this elastic function, right? We need to call it. We need to execute on this node. So we're going to tell it to run when the lens initializes. I want to create this easing function, this elastic. And after I've created that elastic function, I'm going to tell it to start tweening the position. And now you can see the ball is moving up and down with the bounce, right? So this is super awesome. And what we're going to do next is go ahead and, as I promised before, make it position to a random place. So right now it's going to our 0 to 10, so it's similar to what we did before. But now let's get to the magic of visual scripting. We want to generate a random number for this position to move to. And so what I'm going to go ahead and do is, again, I want to pull out what I need. So I want to set where it's going to. And because I want to do a random position, I'll type in random. Or actually, let me show you something else. You can, if you're here in the node, you can press the plus button to add a node. And here I can type again random. And there are other examples. So in this case, random vectory. So random vectory is really cool. because it'll generate for me a random vector 3, so like 0, 0, 0. And I can choose, I want it to go from, let's say, -10 to 10, 10 to 10. And what this will do is it will generate when you call this function, it will generate a random vector from -10 to 10. And so I'm going to now set the vector to plug in the vector that it generates into the vector of this position 2. But it's giving me an error and saying a value is not a native object. Well, it's because the random vector has not generated the value that we want. And so what we're going to do is call this function first before we get to the tween position from 2. So I'm going to go ahead and, let's do this. So I'm going to connect it again. So one cool thing that you can do is if you hold a node and you press shift on your keyboard, you can splice it between different lines. So here there's a line between elastic function and tween position, and I can splice the random vector 3 in, and now it's connected. Now I can connect this vector XYZ. So now you can see the sphere is moving in a random place every time I press refresh. So already really cool capability there. And so we don't have a lot of time left, but I hope you're learning a lot. Please jump in the chat if you have questions about what I've done so far, and I'll try to answer them. So it looks like I won't be able to hit all the questions that was asked earlier, so please go into the forum and ask us there. Amir or I or someone on the team will go take a look. But the other thing that I just really want to show really quickly is the other benefit of a scripting graph is that you can see the logic of your lens, right? So let's clean this up really quick. So right now you can see that when the lens initializes, we're going to create some elasticity. We're going to generate a random number, and we're going to tween or animate the position of an object. So left to right. But let's say we want to do this multiple times. Like how would we want it to keep going to random position every time rather than having to refresh the lens. And you can see in this tween there's this incomplete. So what should the tween do when it's finished? I can pull it out and say, and what I want to do is do a callback. So I want to execute a callback. So what this is saying is like, hey, when the tween ends, do something, call back to a different function because we want to call this whole string again. And I'm going to pull out the callback because we need a callback. And I'll just say callback here. So I'll bring this back to the beginning. And then I can tell this and point this here. And so now if we look at our script graph, we can follow the lines again. When we initialize, again, always start with the orange node. It's going to go create an elastic function. It's going to go into a random and generate a random vector. And then it's going to tween the objects from wherever it's at to the random vector that we generated. And then when it's complete, it's going to call something back. We're going to do something at the end of that complete. We follow that line, follow that callback line. And you'll notice we're going to do a callback, and you'll see the same execution node from earlier, and we're going to draw that line back to the elastic function. And so we're running in this circle. So you can follow this triangle all the way through, and then it's going to call back, go back to the beginning, run the triangle through. And so now you can see this is something that what visual scripting is great at. It's showing you how you can generate random things in the script versus changing them in the inspector. It's also showing you how you can see the logic flow much easier when you have a line to follow through. So that's really cool. We don't have a lot of time left, and maybe we'll catch this in the next stream, or maybe I'll catch it in the forum. But I wanted to show you that what we did earlier is actually not magical at all, because if you'll see these nodes that are fx functions, another function, and I can actually double click on any of these, and you'll notice they're actually JavaScript. So earlier someone had a question like, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about JavaScript and coding. And so script graph is a really great way to do that. For any of these FFX node, they're what's called custom node. In other words, we just wrote a script, this script here, and it will do whatever we wrote in that script whenever it's being called. So in this case, I tell it to run, right, random vec3. I write some code, like a JavaScript in this case, generate a vector3, and then output it so that it can be used in my other nodes. So you can see the same if I select tween position 2. There's a lot of different options. You can see a JavaScript there. So it's actually a pretty great way to interplay between your JavaScript code and visual scripting. So I definitely recommend, even if you've used regular scripting before, to take a look at visual scripting. It allows you to reuse some of the script that you have. So obviously I can just go ahead and copy this a bunch of time, and maybe I'll use one for tween position scale or rotation and whatnot. And you can create new capabilities like that. So next time maybe we'll talk a little bit more about how you can create these custom scripts. But I want to try something new. Why don't we have a homework and then post down below in the comments later if you figure it out. What we want to do, what I want to ask you to do for this homework is to create one of these custom nodes. And the challenge is to create a custom node that allows you to call behavior script. So if I add behavior script, and some of you may already know behavior script basically allows you to set some trigger and have some response, like play video or set color and whatnot. But there's also a send custom trigger. So you can say, hey, when I tap, call this. And you can write some script that responds to call this. What I want you to do is try making a custom node so that you can respond to this behavior in visual scripting. And a hint is to double click on behavior, and you'll notice that there's some information about the API usage. And so all you need to do is call this function in your custom node. And so, so there's a hint, there's the homework. Let's connect behavior script to visual scripting in this custom node. And some other hints that that might be helpful. Go ahead and check out our Lens Studio website. And learn under the guides, and there is visual scripting. So take a look at custom node to learn more about how custom node work, and learn how you can make your own custom node. And take a look at the API you'll need to call in your script. And then if you need additional help, you can find a little bit more information in the template I showed you earlier. So I'm going to save this project so we can share it with you all. My first script. If you open the visual scripting template from earlier, there's a couple behavior script example. Take a look, and hopefully you'll be able to find what you need to finish that homework. And then once you finish, comment down below your script, your custom node, so we can share it around. And then next time, maybe we'll talk about it some more, and we'll show you what other amazing things you can do with visual scripting. So yeah, thank you all so much for spending this time with us. I know that was really quick. This video will be available right afterward, so go ahead and play back, learn more about what we just talked about. Thank you again for spending time with us. We'll see you really soon. See you next month, last Wednesday. Thank you all so much.